Welcome back to Autodesk Digital Builder Podcast. I am your host, Eric Thomas. We are once again coming live from Nashville, Tennessee at Autodesk University. Today, I am joined by Ben Cochran, the Vice President of Engineering here at Autodesk, and we're going to talk about artificial intelligence and model context protocol, which is something that keeps coming up in the news. And I think if you're tied into tech, you've probably heard of MCPs or some variation of this. And today we're going to demystify what this actually means and start getting into the weeds on what it means for artificial intelligence and the way your teams do work. Ben, how you doing today?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you decided to come back for a second time. It means the first episode we did together went well enough where I was able to trick you into coming again. But we're in person, we're live, we're having a good time. I want to say also, of course, we're going to make some assumptions today on folks' knowledge about artificial intelligence as a baseline and dig into things a little bit deeper. So if you need a little bit more context and you're out there listening right now, I would go back to our episode with Tanya Custis, which we did a couple of years ago, where we do a really wonderful primer of AI, especially within the context of construction. But Ben, Model Context Protocol, or MCPs, what is it? What's it all about? And how does it tie into artificial intelligence? Give us a baseline to build off for the rest of our conversation today.
Yeah, so MCP, or a Model Context Protocol, it's a protocol, and it's a protocol created and published by Anthropic. And it's one that's taken off as a tool or protocol for AI agents to talk to other data sources. You can think of it as an API for an LLM. And there's a couple other protocols that are out there as well. And what a protocol does is that a protocol helps build standards so that the agents can have richer experiences where they can tie into data sources without having to learn what the API spec is for that particular data source.
Okay. And can you get a little bit into how a traditional API works and differs from an MCP for folks who might not have that knowledge?
Yes, well, so API is a broad term that can mean it's an interface to be able to connect to an application. And that application can be something that's running on your desktop. It can be the operating system itself. An API, or like a web API, is usually based on a REST protocol. So it's an HTTP connection that connects to a service, and that service returns some sort of data. There's a whole bunch of other protocols that APIs build on. But when you have the infinite world of what an API can be, the LLM has to first figure that out. And so it is possible for an agent or an LLM to go and read documentation, build a connection to an API, and build that whole system to connect. Or you can have an MCP. What happens is that agents are like us. When they have a bunch of work to do and you remove that work, they can get on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And so an MCP helps accelerate what that opportunity is to access that data source.
And even just standalone standard APIs are so critical to the overall infrastructure across the AECO ecosystem. Like if you look at Autodesk, for example, like we don't do, nor do we strive to do everything. So if you're getting data from a drone company or some other reality capture tool, APIs are the connecting thread that bring these tools together where you can transfer your data and information between systems. Am I summarizing that correctly?
That's right. APIs are still critical, even more critical with MCPs and with agentic workflows and the richness that you get from LLMs. And it's because APIs allow systems to connect with each other. And you're right, there is applications that come from Autodesk and services and systems, and then there's third-party services and systems that build out an entire ecosystem. And how those are connected together, right now they're connected together with APIs. There's this new collaborator that's come along, and that's an AI agent. So an AI agent that's driven by an LLM, how do they collaborate with us? And MCPs is a big acceleration or leap forward in the ability to do that.
And why has the buzz around this gotten such a big groundswell in the last few months in particular? I'll be honest, 4 months ago, probably, maybe even sooner than that, I had never heard of an MCP and I had no idea what it was. And I had to reach out to some engineering friends to be like, hey, help me here, because I'm not a technical guy as far as like the developing and backend goes, and I needed a little bit of help. Why is this turning into a bit of a rocket ship right now?
It's a rocket ship built on a rocket ship. So what was happening, and what we've all seen with LLMs and agents, and we've seen this, hopefully, we're starting to incorporate AI into all the things that we do, whether it's at the very basic areas where we say, yeah, it's summarizing an email or it's helping me draft a document, but those all for a while had been, I would say, rather contained.
Mhm.
So you're either using a tool or you're using this agent, like I'm using Claude or I'm using a Copilot or
Yeah,
something.
you're moving from tool to tool, the system to system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what happened really was it wasn't MCP, it was these agentic opportunities. So now what you're doing is you're asking the model to do an action. So you're actually describing an outcome that you want to complete. And then that agent is now operating, I would say almost like an intern would. And I like to refer to agents as interns because they're very capable, they reason very well, but they don't have any context for what they're trying to do. And that's our job, is to set that context and give them the outcome that or the result of what they're trying to do. Now, that was always contained within the tool that you were using. But what MCP does is it allows that to expand to other tools. So now I can have other systems, like maybe it's Autodesk Construction Cloud, or maybe it's Revit itself, or maybe it's SAP database. Now all of a sudden I can connect to that other data source and pull that data in, and now the agents have a far wider scope that they can operate in.
This kind of feels like that moment in time now where we're getting closer to the bigger vision of artificial intelligence that everybody speculated about or felt was on the cusp when I think some of these concepts started coming to market. And then, they got deeper into some of the earlier iterations of like ChatGPT or something and felt a bit dissatisfied. It feels like the evolution here is kind of hitting this critical moment. And it feels like MCPs in particular are a big catalyst as to making this effective in this more sci-fi kind of way than we've historically been able to actually deliver on as bigger companies.
Exactly. It's increasing the capabilities of what an agent can do, or what ChatGPT or Perplexity, all these tools, what they can do has now been vastly expanded. Cursor is another great application. Cursor is a development tool that is run by, you have an LLM, or you can choose which LLM you're going to use. But it's a coding tool where instead of writing and starting with software, I go and describe an outcome. You give it a spec doc for what software you want to create, and it goes and it builds a plan. It tells you what that plan is. It has these whatever steps, 6 steps, and then starts executing against those steps. It validates itself at each of the steps along the way, and then it asks you to validate. And you can come and you look at the application that was built, and then all of a sudden you go, well, now that I see the application, I try to change the spec, and you start to partner with the machine. And the end result is you are a far more effective developer, especially when building software, is that these MCPs now allow you to connect to other services and systems, get documentation, learn about other systems. How do you integrate with another platform? It really grows the scope from what's right in front of you to, I don't know, maybe infinite.
And it's changing the way we're interacting with software in an interesting way as well. I mean, just the way that you're talking right now is you're describing the end state that you want. Like if you think about just opening, MS Paint for an example, like that's not how that process would work. And now you're driving this process forward in a very unique way, but it also has an interesting democratizing effect of access to these tools. And now MS Paint might not be a great example, but somebody who doesn't have the skill set to really leverage and take advantage of this tool now is a different way of interacting with it. And that's pretty unique.
100%. It's outcome-based workflows. And so you can describe that outcome. And there's a whole bunch of things that happen afterwards. So you're right. I don't have that particular skill, or maybe I don't have the time to put in to be able to produce that result. And every time you have something where you have an intended outcome and you describe that outcome, Mike talked about that today, that rubber ducking. And what you can do is you describe an outcome and then you can see the result. And all of a sudden now I realize, the outcome I was describing wasn't actually what I need. I need to iterate on that.
Yeah.
And so now instead of being, okay, I completed this thing, it took me 2 weeks to do. If I can complete that in 10 minutes, how many more alternatives can I try? How much more can I refine that outcome and create something that is maybe better than what I had originally thought I could do?
It's an exciting moment. And I'd love it if we could connect this a bit to the world of AECO. What does this mean for our industry in the way that we kind of move the way work gets done forward?
There's a bunch of things that we compromise on, because they're too time intensive or they cost too much. Those are usually related to, I'm not talking about materials, I'm talking about people, people's time and people's cost. And so what we can do now is that flips. Now it takes, instead of weeks, it can take moments to be able to run alternatives, to be able to audit your documents, to get documents ready for construction, going out to bid, doing BIM validation. Like BIM validation is a great one. So BIM validation right now, The way you do this is you write a bunch of code that says, these are the valid objects in my document, and these are invalid. And then just goes and flags them. And so maybe you have, I don't know, a bunch of IFC classes that are not supposed to be in the document. You flag them, then that has a bunch of tasks that go to the engineer who then has to go clean up the document. Well, that's a lot of work just to go through that list. Why not have alternatives? Why not have the agent go and say, find all of the things that are not, we need to change, and make recommendations for what there should be. And now all of a sudden the engineer is reviewing the changes instead of actually having to look up what all those changes are.
And I think that's the sweet spot of this tool, for this type of technology moving forward, is limiting those painful repetitive tasks where it's, okay, like obviously I think a good example is like spec books where you're going through and you're doing just manual takeoffs for 10 years. And I remember the last general contractor I worked at, like our pre-construction team, they would lock themselves in a room and do takeoffs for a $400 million building for 2 weeks. And in the amount of time spent there, and also the opportunity for human error, and granted, which actually leads into my next question, is like, of course, the tools at this state sometimes will hallucinate or give you something that you're not quite expecting or anticipating, but it does drive the whole industry in a very unique way of working, very different from where we have been traditionally.
It totally does. You're right. It reduces those toilsome things, those jobs that are just, we all have those things where we know they need to happen.
Yeah.
And if we don't do them, it's a real problem, but we don't want to. They're toil. And if it can remove those toils or accelerate that toil, it still needs validation by us at the end, and I think it will for a while. The interesting thing, though, about, there are hallucinations, there are mistakes that it makes. There is a demo we actually show from Arcadis where they moved from a very algorithmic view of BIM validation to something where they actually run this model, and the model gets the right answer.
Nice. I'm glad to see that it's actually out in the real world and making an impact today too. And that's another thing I want to make sure folks understand too, is like, this is happening now. Like, we are not speaking theoretically anymore. And I think that's exciting. And I don't know what's coming, but I'm not the technical expert, so that probably makes a bunch of sense.
Well, you bring something up there that's really interesting, because there is the technology, and we can talk about the technology and what the impact is. But there's an element of how we use the technology as, in our job, in our personal life, that will shape the technology, and then it'll also shape the adoption of it. If we don't change the way we work, then you're right. It's just a technology. So those things can't be decoupled. We're a part of the change.
Yeah, there's a top-down mandate that needs to happen in some organizations. And I feel like Autodesk, especially in the marketing world right now, like, we're having a lot of really deliberate conversations about how we can bring tools in to be very intentional and optimized about our resourcing and the way we get work done. I'm grateful for it, even though early on, I'll be very honest, like some of the tools rolling in, I'm like, oh, okay, like this isn't coming together. But then new iterations come out and I go, okay, like this actually helps me do whatever aspect of my work faster, or I don't have to think about it. One example comes to mind as far as that painful task. I look forward to the day where I can just automate away my expense reports. And I'm thinking about that coming out of Autodesk University. I'm like, please make that go away.
100%.
Because that hurts every time I have to do it. I'm not good at it. And I toil away in a way that I don't appreciate. Can you kind of overview a little bit about what else right now for artificial intelligence more broadly, folks are getting a bit frustrated by, and how do you think this is going to change in the near future?
Change is hard on people.
Yes.
And I think the frustration comes oftentimes from not knowing and having a lot of questions and uncertainty. I think the best way to engage with that is to engage and to learn about that and to be the driver of that change. I know that can be scary, but I think change is inevitable in this case. And we've gone through major technology changes in the past. The adoption of the PC is a great example. Internet of Connected Things. Well, it took a long time to get to, the advantages we saw in the 2000s. But would you imagine what if you said, no, I'm not going to do that as a company? That you put yourself in a disadvantage and you make yourself non-competitive. I think right now, the companies that are going to be ahead are the ones that are going to try out and experiment. And it doesn't necessarily mean you need to commit to an answer, but I think to understand and be a part of that change, I think that takes a lot of that stress and that uncertainty away, because now all of a sudden you're about seeing the change happening in real time.
And I think the tool that you adopt today, if you're making small iterations and figuring out, might not be the tool you use in 2 years, but you're bringing your team and your process along. You're going, we're doing this, we're committed to it, we're trying it. And I think the difference between a good prompt with an AI agent and in a bad one is pretty considerable in the output. And you don't intuitively understand how to create a good prompt. And so there's some trial and error, and there's some knowledge and some learning. And I think that kind of comes big picture with just all of the change that we're talking about here. But the pace has accelerated in a way that can feel quite overwhelming for folks. And I empathize with that. But I also think that this is the moment to be optimistic, because that rapid acceleration is why people are excited about these tools in a way that they were not 6 or 12 months ago.
Yeah, I think the rapid acceleration, I think it gives people more capabilities. It helps people do things faster. If you can do something in 10 minutes that took you 2 weeks, you might not have tried the thing that you would have done in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it allows for far more experimentation. It allows for far more diving in and just what if, asking that question over and over again. Well, what if I did this? Or what if I could do this? How would that change the outcome? How would that change the result? There's even, I know in my in my work, right, like a lot of communication, there's times where you're like, whoa, we're not on the same page.
Yeah.
Let me go and draft a description of where I think we're at, or what is the current status. Maybe that would have taken me a long time. I would have had, build a full document, you get your sources. Now all of a sudden I give the tool, the request. I go, here's where I think we are. I need sources. I need a document. I'm still delivering the content, but it's doing all the work to actually form things together. I'm validating the sources. It's all real content. And I'm so much more effective at communicating and then bringing other stakeholders along. And, that's my job, right? I have to bring stakeholders along. So,
but I love your point about 10 minutes versus 2 weeks, because a 10-minute task, the stakes are so much lower there. And it's just really neat to consider, okay, even if you try 3 times, now you've saved something that would have taken you 6 weeks. And would you have done all of those things, especially given how busy all of us are at work to begin with, or even in our personal lives? Probably not. And so I love your point earlier, especially about unlocking all of these different opportunities and just really kind of leveling the playing field in a way that is quite unique from historical developments in technology, I think.
The results, if we do it right, the outcome should be better as well.
I know Autodesk made a lot of really cool announcements today, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but I'd love it if you could just kind of give me a high level of what was announced today that you're most excited about. I guess that's probably a good place to land.
I kind of group those into 2 things. So I think first, what you got this morning from Andrew was showing off a bunch of areas where AI is going to show up in the products to make the products better. And a lot of these, or I think all the ones I would say classify that from Andrew, were all areas that are known toilsome areas that are going to be made better. And I get excited about that. I love reducing toil. I think that efficiency. I'm always wanting to optimize things, even too much. My wife will tell me. So I love those. I get excited about those. But what I really get excited about was what you got to see from Raji and Mike in the AI keynote. I love that we're sharing where we can possibly go in that future. I get really excited about the potential of what that opens up. The technology, even AI technology, unlike Tanya, who you talked with, that's not my area of expertise or my area of education. And she is, phenomenal in that area. I get excited about what it unlocks, what the new potential is, and the new door that gets opened. And especially for the industries that Autodesk serves, it's huge potential to have things that are better designed. I think so many times we have to at some point, time and money, stop short of making that design better. I'm the kind of person who walks into a room and I'm like, oh, they didn't think of this. Yeah. Oh, what if this? And you talk to designers and architects and engineers, and they're always coming up with, I wish we could have. And I feel like this just pulls that in more, and that wish we could have now can become the reality because you can do more and you have more capability.
I can see how it stings when, it's pencils down. We have to finish now.
It does.
And the architect's like, but I had so much more in me, and I think especially as we move to a more sustainable world in the materials and everything that we choose to incorporate into our buildings and the way we reuse a lot of materials and all of these great things moves forward, I think technology like this becomes increasingly more important because it's what allows you to step back and look and go, okay, how am I going to leverage this? How am I going to make changes and make things move forward in a way that has more impact? And I think everything we're talking about today is going to play a very big role there.
100%. It's complexity. And what's stopping buildings from being greener, better aesthetically, better environment, better to work in, better to remodel, all these things is complexity.
Yeah.
Like, we can do so much more if we can handle more complexity, and these tools provide us the ability to do that.
So if somebody's out there and they're like, gosh, MCPs sound incredibly interesting, I want to learn more, I want to experiment, what would your recommendation be for them to get their feet wet? Like, I wouldn't know where to start if I wasn't following your lead or something along those lines. So like, how could people who are curious really get going?
Well, so I would say there's sort of levels, right? I would say, for one, I would look at, and I would actually start with agentic tools, right? So ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity. I would grab these tools. There's a bunch more. Install them, work with them, try to understand how they can help me. And I would try to really figure out, okay, so at the prompt, how do I get the result I want? I end up writing more and more actually at the prompt than I started with. When I first started, I would ask a question, like I was almost Googling something. Now I go and I say, I need this. And I go and give a whole rundown of everything I need, everything I want. I'll even go, if I have an example of something, I'll say, I want it to be in this format using this example. And I give it a lot of, just as much content as I can. That produces a better outcome. And then MCP, which is interesting, is when you're going to start to see MCPs, and really what it is you can give it, it's a URL. So you just take it and you'd say, I want to connect to this service, or I want data from this provider. And you put the URL in there and you say, go get the data from maybe this news source if they have an MCP. And you put it in there, and all of a sudden now you can have the agent go and get the data, get the the news source, the data source, or whatever it is, and it pulls that into your content. What you're going to see also is you're going to see MCPs. There's MCP marketplaces. You can look in there. There's MCP tools for Revit that you can add, which can allow you to control Revit from like a Claude or something like that. So it's super interesting. You're going to see a bunch come out from Autodesk that are going to be really interesting, and you'll be able to connect to. Yeah, and then the other thing is, if you're on the developer side and you're actually willing to go a little bit deeper into that, I would say grab a tool like Cursor and play with it. Go and say, hey, what is it? You open it up, you say, create a project, and then start describing stuff. Start saying, what if I could do this? What if I could do that? The tool will actually come back and tell you what it's capable of. And it will start to build the things that you're looking for.
I love it. It seems like a lot is coming down the pipe, and there's a lot of great places to start that you've kind of walked through here, whether they're tied to Autodesk or otherwise. And so for the curious out there, there's definitely paths to get started. Ben, I got one more question for you today. I asked you last time, I can't remember what you said. I'm gonna have to go back and compare my notes, but what is one tool that you use in every project, no matter what you're working on? And I hope it's not going to be ChatGPT, because that's cheating based on what we're talking about.
No. I don't think this was my answer last time, although I can't remember either. I would say it's curiosity.
Okay.
I think I do my best when I'm curious, when I just keep asking what if, and just challenging the status quo. I always get the best outcome when I'm curious.
I like that. And I think it's a big part of why I really enjoy speaking with you, because we always have such interesting conversations, and you tolerate my curious questions too. I'm like, help me understand this, because I come into the narrative oftentimes and I don't. So I appreciate your guidance and wisdom and everything you've shared today. And of course, just for joining me on Digital Builder again. For everybody out there listening, of course, this is Autodesk Digital Builder Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Thomas. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you get your favorite podcasts. And again, thank you so much for joining us here in Nashville. Until the next time, goodbye.